Welcome to another episode of the Gay Barchives Show, where we explore gay history one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and our guest today is Wayne Shepard. We'll be talking about Bullwinkles in Bloomington, Indiana.
So, welcome to the show, Wayne.
Well, thank you, Art.
I'm kind of excited to have you here because I've heard about the bar that you had like a 14-year relationship with, and nobody has ever spoken about it before. There's not a ton of information on the internet about it. So this should be an episode that should inform a lot of people about a place that was around for a good long while in Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Bullwinkles was a mainstay in Bloomington, Indiana for a long, long time, and attracted a wide variety of people. I actually started there when the bar opened in 1979. There was a club that I worked at previous to that called the Omni, which was very briefly around. I think the Omni was only there for about 6 months before Bullwinkles opened. That's when, and one of the owners from the Omni opened Bullwinkles, and I moved with him over there. The the name came about not because of any affiliation with the cartoon character, but because it was in the old Moose Lodge building, and so thus the owner came up with Bullwinkles, and well, about 6 months later, he got sued, of course, and he actually won that lawsuit because there was no they couldn't show where he had actually stolen that name from any writer or anything. So they allowed him to keep the name, which was really good. Because there was already a busy bar by then, and you never want to change names and stuff like that when you're getting off the ground. But Bullwinkles was a really unique place because Bloomington, Indiana is home to Indiana University. So in the summertime, there's 70,000 people in town, and in the fall through the spring, there's 150,000. The town basically doubles in size, and so you had a group of people at Bullwinkles that remained constant because of all of the people who live in town, the people, the base of the bar, the people who were there all the time. But then you had a transient crowd, which changed out, every year to, new people coming in and old people leaving. And it made for a very, very interesting and fun environment because you always had young people there having a great time, and the townspeople who went in there and have known each other for years and years and years and years, and no, it was just an amazing spot. The main bar itself was in the basement of this building. And then the upstairs was more like a big ballroom. The upstairs actually had another name. It was called Second Story when they would have special like live events there. But then they also had occasional like drag shows and drag contests there. So it's sometimes it was Bullwinkle, sometimes it was Second Story. But
so what was the environment like in Bloomington, Indiana, in 1979, as far as the gay world was concerned? We're talking about 10 years after Stonewall, but in a lot of small towns, Stonewall didn't have a huge impact, other than maybe a few headlines. So what was Bloomington like as far as being gay in Bloomington in 1979 when Bullwinkles opened?
Well, so see, that correlates very well to what was going on within the bar as well, because you had the Bloomington residents and especially around the perimeters of Bloomington. It's southern Indiana, so very, very conservative. But yet in Bloomington itself, you had the college, so extremely liberal. So, and there were many, 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 many nights going into the bar where somebody would drive by and throw a bottle at me or something and scream "faggot" out the window window or whatever, and that happened on a fairly regular basis. But for the most part, I mean, IU had, when I first started doing anything like going out, was probably 1975, and Bloomington already had the Bloomington Gay Alliance, so which basically was formed from IU, and the Episcopal Church in Bloomington had a lot to do with that as well. But yeah, it was very. Um, there was always that mix of the very conservative Southern Indiana people and the more liberal college. So there were clashes. There were lots of not so nice stuff. I was jumped a couple of times myself. A couple of friends of mine were hurt. Pretty severely at one point, just by gay bashers. But there were places that were very open too. So, some good, some bad.
So for being in the Midwest, it wasn't the worst place in the world you could be. You didn't.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, it was one of the better places you could be. I mean, Bloomington was and still is a mecca. It really is. And Indiana just passed their own version of a "Don't Say Gay" bill yesterday.
Oh no.
Yeah, right. So Indiana is, as far as the entire state, is getting more and more conservative, or at least they're electing more and more conservative legislators. But Bloomington remains a liberal bastion in the middle of it. So it's a great place to live.
Now, you mentioned that briefly before Bullwinkle's, there was a bar called Omni that was around for about 6 months or so. What was Omni like? What kind of a bar was it? Was it a neighborhood bar, a dance bar?
Oh, it was a dance bar. Oh, so I'm going to give you a brief history of the gay bars in Bloomington, because it's quite an amazing story. There were three bars that were basically referred to as the Levee, because they were right down next to the railroad tracks. It was really sort of a seedy area of town. And one of them was called the Alley Bar, and then there was the Kirkwood Bar, and then the other one was called I can't even remember. Some name I don't even remember. But the interesting thing was the Kirkwood Bar. The Kirkwood Bar was owned by two brothers, Philip and Donnie Joe Ellington. Well, Donnie Joe is gay, and the Kirkwood Bar, I mean, he had the most redneck of redneck clientele you could ever meet. But they were so redneck that they didn't care what anybody else did. They just, as long as they could sit there with their drinks and be rednecks, they didn't care. But one Christmas break for IU, there's a 2-week break for winter. Donnie Joe got drunk and just took pieces of regular notebook paper and wrote on them, said, "The Kirkwood Bar is now a gay bar." And he went around and stapled them on light posts all over town. So all the students come back, and all of a sudden you have all of these gay college students invading this redneck bar. And that was Bloomington's first gay bar. Well, that lasted for about 2.5 years, and it was crazy, because you still had all of the old toothless rednecks sitting at the bar, with the drag queens on the stage and all the young gay college people in there. It was just a wild view. Yeah, it lasted for about 2 years before Donnie Joe got sick and had a heart attack, and they had to close the place down. Well, immediately these 5 people got together and they bought the building right next door, the bar that I can't remember the name of, and they bought a flashing dance floor, like a Saturday Night Live dance floor, from a straight dance club that closed down on Kirkwood, and they installed that. It was a 2-room bar, so you walked in and there was just a long bar on one side with pool tables in the back and a dartboard over on the side. It could be any college bar. And then the other side had a shorter bar and the dance floor all the way in the back, and then booths where people could sit. It was a really, really nice bar, but you had five owners who didn't know each other that well when they got into this. So there was lots of clashing going on. So it just, a business can't survive like that. So, it got I guess the Moose Lodge building came up for sale. And Phil basically offered to buy everyone else out of their liquor licenses and open up Bullwinkles. So
So
that's how it came about.
the bar that you were talking about with the flashing Saturday Night Fever dance floor, was that the Omni?
That was the Omni.
Okay, so he was a partner with 4 other people in that bar, and then
Correct.
bought them out because it wasn't working out that way, and decided to open Bullwinkles on his own.
Correct. And that all happened within about a month's time. So, and the flashing dance floor went with him to Bullwinkles, and it was there until I left in 2000 or until I left in 1993 until they closed in 2003.
So, how big was the bar? Do you know?
Bullwinkles?
Yeah.
Square foot, I couldn't tell you, but I know the downstairs had an occupancy of like 370 people, and the upstairs was like 450 people.
So it's a good sized bar.
Oh yeah, it was a good sized bar for sure. Yeah, the dance floor was probably, and I should actually know this, the dance floor was probably 20 by 25 feet. So it was a good sized dance floor, and it was packed. Not to blow my own horn, but yeah, it was the busiest bar in Bloomington pretty much every weekend night.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think John Travolta got any commissions on those dance floors, but he's responsible for selling a lot of them, because there were quite a few that have popped up in my research in different clubs around the country, that it was just like the cool thing to have in that time frame. That multicolor plexiglass dance floor that blinked colors.
Oh yeah, and even when it became pretty uncool, Phil would not relinquish it. So it's good. I'm glad he held on to it. Actually, looking back on it now, it was fun. But yeah, I mean, we had another interesting thing about Bullwinkles is it was the place where people would actually go to party. There were some straight bars around, but they just weren't a whole lot of fun. So whenever we had, IU has there's a lot of cultural things going on at IU. There's always shows and stuff like that. So, we would have a lot of famous people come through there, because basically they had no better place to go in Bloomington, Indiana when they were here. So, yeah. That Manhattan Transfer was in there one night, and we had the Alvin Ailey dance troupe in there one night, and it's just like whenever there were shows at IU, they came to Bullwinkles afterwards. So,
and they just came to party. They weren't there to perform or
oh yeah, they came to party,
to enjoy themselves.
Correct. Now we did have upstairs at Second Story. They had some amazing people performing up there too, as well. But it was REM performed there when they were just starting out. There was this great woman. What's her name? Queen Ida with their Zydeco band, and they're very famous in the in that world. And yeah, she played there 4 times, and I will never forget like I said, the upstairs was just one ballroom, and they would have like the, Miss Gay USA pageant there a couple of times. But sometimes they would get these bands in there that would just absolutely pack the place. We were definitely over limit people wise. And sometimes it was just so hot that it's like the entire building was sweating. But it was amazing, and the whole place would be vibrating and bouncing up and down. And it was a really, really cool experience. Yeah.
So when Bullwinkles opened, was it the talk of the town? Did everybody suddenly say, "Oh my God, we have this fabulous new place opening," or did it just kind of take a while for people to hear about it and show up?
Oh no, I mean we were busy pretty much from word go because I mean the Omni was closing down. Nobody went there, so and everybody knew immediately that Bullwinkle's was the place to go. Now at first it was mainly a gay crowd, and it stayed a gay crowd throughout the time that I was there. But as time went on, more and more straight people would show up, just because, like I said, the straight bars were boring, so they would come there to have fun. So, but yeah, I mean we. And I was lucky because I was pretty much in touch with a lot of people who knew what they were doing in the dance music industry. So I got my hands on really good music really early, and so I always prided myself on turning people on to good dance music.
So what was your role with the bar when you first started there? What were you hired to do?
I was the DJ.
And did you
I was the
continue to do
DJ.
that the entire 14 years, or did you take on other responsibilities?
I bartended every once in a while, like if we would have a guest DJ or if I would usually work 4 nights a week and like a fifth night I would bartend, but yeah, it was mainly as a DJ. Um, yeah, and then, I remember playing "Off the Wall" by Michael Jackson the first time, and I remember playing "Vogue" by Madonna the first time, and yeah, but being a DJ in a bar like that is really interesting. Um, it used to, when we first opened up, you walked in, you went down the stairs, and the dance floor was right there right there as you walked in on the right hand side, and then the bar was over on the left hand side with tables in between. And then you look, if you went back to the back, there was a pool room back there with three pool tables, and the DJ booth was on the far side of the dance floor, and sort of divided off the pool tables. And there was more than one time, more than a few times that there were, a couple of nice lesbians would get in a fight, and all of a sudden they would bounce off the DJ booth wall, and all the records would skip and stuff. But we eventually moved the dance floor or the DJ booth to just as you walk into the door to the right, which opened up the entire room, which made it, I think, a nicer bar just because you could see the entire bar. You could walk in and see who was there and who you wanted to sit with and who you wanted to sleep with that night.
Yeah, bars were a lot different back then. I remember my first bar experiences were right around the time that you're talking about. My first gay bar experience was in 78. And
Nice.
I didn't really know at that point that gay bars existed. It just didn't occur to me that there was such a thing.
Right.
And I had this de facto boyfriend from high school that we had dated for a while and slept together and done all kinds of stuff for a couple of years. But we never knew that there was such a thing as a gay relationship at that point. We just knew that we were enjoying ourselves. And I went to see him at college, and he took me out to a bar that he had since discovered was a gay bar in the town where he went to college. And so it was quite a surprise for me to walk into a bar and see that everybody on the dance floor was male, dancing with other males. Because at that
Right.
time
Right.
in the 70s, it wasn't as commonplace as it is now. I mean, we've changed a lot in our perception, but back then, in a lot of places, especially in smaller towns and cities, you would never see that. I mean, you wouldn't even dream of finding two guys dancing together or holding hands or looking at all affectionate anywhere in public.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was quite a novelty. Now, you said there were a couple of bars before Bullwinkle's. You mentioned the Alley in Kirkwood and Omni. How much earlier did they precede Bullwinkle's? How long had there been gay bars in
So
um
I told you the story of the Kirkwood, and I believe that happened Christmas break of 1974.
okay.
Was when Donnie went around and nailed up signs all over Bloomington, um, and by the spring semester of 75, the gay bar could officially be called, or the Kirkwood bar could officially be called a gay bar because weekend nights, that's all you would find there, except for the one redneck who was too drunk to leave, who was over in the corner somewhere. But the Kirkwood got raided a couple of times. At first, the police were pretty down on the bar, but like I said, Bloomington itself is very liberal, so that means the politicians in Bloomington tend to be very liberal. And in 1978, they elected this guy named Frank McCluskey as mayor. And he and I became really good friends, just super liberal. And he basically told the cops to leave us alone, and they did. And just 2 years after that, liberal Democratic police chief was elected, and so we never had any real issues with the police after that. But yeah, we're talking in Bloomington. I would say from early 1975 on, there was a good gay bar scene here.
That's refreshing to know that. And you mentioned in Bullwinkle's, you mentioned on the downstairs, the basement bar was the main hangout bar of Bullwinkle's.
Correct.
And that's where your DJ booth was. That's where the dance floor was. That's where people tended to congregate on most nights. Was that the part that was open all the time, or?
Correct. The upstairs was only open on the weekends usually, unless there just happened to be a special like live show that we needed. If we did shows upstairs during the week, it was usually like jazz quartets or something like that. And on those nights, I would just keep the music low downstairs until they were done doing their thing. The upstairs was mainly just a weekend spot. The downstairs was always where the action was happening.
Now you mentioned that the name was not affiliated with the cartoon character Bullwinkle in any way at all, but that the building had been used as a moose lodge prior to becoming the bar Bullwinkle's.
Correct.
Was there anything in the bar that they put as an homage to either the Moose Lodge or to the cartoon character, just to kind of play off that whimsical theme? Or was it pretty much a normal looking bar inside?
It was a normal looking bar inside. It was really cool because there was the bar was one huge old wooden hand carved bar that had come out of a place on Kirkwood Street that Nick's English Hut, that had been there for years and years and years and years, like since the 30s or 40s or something like that. And they sold their bar to the Kirkwood bar, and that bar went from that old wooden bar, and it was huge, probably 30 something feet long. That bar went from there to the Omni, and from the Omni to the Kirkwood bar. So, and as far as I know, that bar is still around somewhere. It's probably approaching 100 years old, but it had the glass cylinders in it. The columns made up of glass cylinders with lights inside of them. Really, really beautiful. But no real homage, because they had to be careful. They had to be careful about the whole Bullwinkles thing, because that was their case, is that it wasn't connected to that cartoon character at all. So if anyone said, "Oh, well, there's pictures of Bullwinkle all over the walls," then they would have had some issues.
Probably so. And they didn't have like a moose head hanging on the wall or anything.
No. There was a stained glass. When you walked into the bar, there was one big stairwell that went downstairs, one big stairwell that went upstairs. And on the second story landing, if you looked at the front of the building, there was a stained glass Moose Lodge logo. And that stayed there the entire time, just because it was gorgeous and nobody wanted to take it out. So,
wow, that's pretty cool. It's always interesting when you find other properties that would probably not have been gay friendly that become gay bars. I mean, I've seen churches become gay bars. I've seen,
Oh yeah.
you know, for lodges like that, different kinds of businesses that you would think of, you know, old school service stations, things that, you know, gay people wouldn't have been accepted in before. And then somebody comes along with some cash and turns it into a gay bar, and it becomes kind of a novelty. What kind of crowd did Bullwinkle's attract? I mean, obviously, you said initially it was all gay, but some bars have an older or younger crowd. Some are more inclined toward working boys, uh, you know, hustlers and stuff like that. What kind of crowd did
Yeah.
Bullwinkle tend to attract?
I mean, through the week, it was mostly townspeople, you know, people who have regular jobs and stuff. And on the weekends, it was more students. We did have drag shows though on Mondays and Wednesday nights, and those tended to attract a lot of younger people. But yeah, we had happy hours starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoons. Um, and that was always like an older male crowd, and then you know, you get a few women, and they would be, you know, mainly stay in the back and play pool and watch TV and stuff. And there was a huge TV, you know, on a, we didn't have flat screens back then, so there was this huge TV sitting on a chest next to in the wall, and people would come in and watch the news and, you know, whatever, and have drinks, and then about 9 o'clock, people would start filtering in. And the older gentlemen who were there for a happy hour would usually leave about that time. And yeah, as the nights went on, they would progress, and the crowd would get younger and younger. And but for the most part, the college students packed the place on the weekends. And yeah, by 11 on the weekends, most of the towny people were gone. So.
Now, at that time in Indiana, could you drink while you were in college? I mean, was the drinking age below 21? Because most people in college are under 21.
Yeah, no, it's always been 21 in Indy, or in Bloomington. So, and then they were pretty strict about IDs. But you know, we would still get some young folks in. But yeah, I mean, IU has a really big graduate student base too. So we would get the people from 21 to 25, and yeah, that was a pretty good age range during the weekends.
So are there any particularly memorable nights from your 14 years at Bullwinkle's that just stand out in your mind? That if somebody said, "Hey, tell me something about something that happened at Bullwinkle's while you were there," is there anything that just really kind of stands out as an unusual experience? Or
Besides meeting my husband.
you met your husband there?
I did. I was in the DJ booth one night. It was Christmas Eve actually, and I was a friend of mine was up in the booth with me, and this I see this guy walk in. I was like, "Who is that?" And my friend said, "I don't know." And I was like, "Wow, I should go talk to him." And my friend Rick goes, "Well, if you don't, I'm going to." And so I went over and I introduced myself to him, and we talked for a while, and didn't get up the nerve to ask him out for like another month, but we ended up spending 34 years together. So
Wow. So
yeah,
that's definitely a memorable experience from
yeah,
Bullwinkle.
that's probably my most memorable experience at Bullwinkle's. But I mean, there were a lot of really really good times there. I I met so many good people there, and people, like I said, that would come and go. You meet somebody and they would become a really good friend. Then 3 years later they graduate from school and they're gone. So, and some of them you keep in touch with, and some of you don't. But I can tell you one story, and which changed my life really. And I had this good friend named Chris Young, and he had been coming in the bar for probably 3 years or something, and I knew he was getting ready to graduate. And he came in one night and he was so excited because he goes, "Wayne, I got this job as a producer on this new show in New York." it's going to be, it stars this guy named Jon Stewart. It's called The Daily Show. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So of course, you know what that became, you know, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. And the funny thing is, you know, my friend Chris went